Matt, with the last few years with the Idaho legislature, there's been a significant push to push members of an already marginalized community, well, further into the margins. From dictating what gender markers on a birth certificate, to what bathroom can be used by a transgender person or what teams they can join, to whether books about them can be in the children's section of the library, to this year's resolution to revoke the rights for same-sex couples to marry. It's been a stressful few years for our LGBTQ plus neighbors. Well, today at the State House, there was a little bit of an attempt to push back a bit on all that, with a somewhat silent gathering of people who want to remind lawmakers they still haven't added the words sexual orientation and gender identity to the Idaho Human Rights Act. Somewhat silent, I say, until someone started a chant. And they want to add the words. And this obviously isn't the first time there's been a public outcry for lawmakers to add the words. This campaign dates back to the late 1990s. But it wasn't until Cole Lefavour was elected as Idaho's first openly gay lawmaker in 2004 that it became a thing at the State House. The first legislative push came in 2006 while Cole was in the House. But there wasn't a bill printed until they moved over into the Senate side, and Senate Bill 1033 was introduced in 2011. There still wasn't ever a public hearing on that bill, though. It just sat in a drawer in the Senate State Affairs Committee. The very next year, in 2012, the Add the Words campaign took a different approach. Former lawmaker Cole Lefavour sat down with us today, and she takes the Add the Words story from there.
Our sticky notes are simply words, not a permanent fixture.
The sticky note years were important because I would say at that point, if they're not going to hold a public hearing and hear people's stories, then we have to bring the stories in. You know, we have to let people write them on this little teeny square of paper and post them where lawmakers can't miss them. I mean, certainly security guards took them down every time we put them up, but we put more. And again every day, and we put thousands of them up that year.
Still no hearing.
Still no hearing.
Then in 2014, that was when the silent protests in the halls of the Capitol started.
You're under arrest. Step forward.
It was just too easy for them to ignore us, and we had to do something that they just couldn't. One morning, came in the building really early, and we set up one hand over our mouths, arms interlocked, and we blocked all the doors of the Senate chamber. And we said, go down and start work on the bill to add the words, and they didn't. And people stood really bravely for long hours, and finally the Senate arrested all 44 people instead of adding the words, instead of holding a hearing, instead of working on the bill.
And you were one of those.
Get her out. You know, the world heard about what was happening here, that people could be fired from their jobs and could lose their rental apartments or be turned away from a business. And you know, we can still be turned away from businesses here. We haven't been added to the Human Rights Act. It doesn't say sexual orientation, gender identity. And at the time, it maybe didn't feel like I was going to do anything, but the next year the House held a hearing, finally.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2 is a simple bill.
Finally, they heard people's stories, and it changed minds.
I don't use public restrooms. I cannot change in a locker room. And I rarely go out with friends.
Many of my colleagues, former colleagues who I had served with, said that they wanted to vote yes to add the words, but they were told they couldn't.
Really?
Yeah. And I would say that that began a trend in this place, which wasn't that you get to vote your conscience anymore. Too often it's predetermined, and my colleagues, my former colleagues, they just vote out of fear.
Many of our GLBT brothers and sisters live in constant fear of losing their jobs.
I think that the people of Idaho have always been far ahead of this legislature in terms of their understanding of why it matters to make sure that all people just can work hard and, you know, live in their communities and contribute without fear of discrimination.
That's got to be frustrating to hear that, to have your colleagues say, gosh, I really wanted to, but I was told no.
It made me cry, it made them cry. I had some really powerful moments with many of the folks in here who didn't get to vote their conscience. And to this year, that still happens. Those aren't the kind of politics that represent the people.
Since 2016, it's all been personal bills.
Yes.
There's been no movement on it.
No.
Is that another layer of frustration?
I worry because it's worse than that. Instead of not just passing a bill to say that you shouldn't discriminate or harm people because they're gay or transgender. Now the bills themselves harm people because they're gay and transgender.
What's significant about today?
I think looking back on a moment when we had a voice in this building, maybe the last moment we had a voice in this building, and knowing that we still have voices, no matter where we are in this state, we still have voices. And this building right now might not be listening, but our neighbors are listening. My hope is that that this fades, that people want their lawmakers and their government to focus on making everybody's lives better and stop focusing on hate and on anger and on cruelty.
It has now been 15 years since an Add the Words bill was first printed, and still, there's only been that one public hearing on it. It lasted 3 days, by the way, with testimony overwhelmingly in favor of it. Yet the House State Affairs Committee had failed to advance it in 2015. Well, since 2016, as you heard, there has been an Add the Words bill printed, but they've all been personal bills, which means they basically go nowhere. This year, that bill was sponsored by Senator Melissa Wintrow. Cole Lefavour has been working on a book these past 10 years, and I want to apologize, I misspoke earlier. They are hoping Love and Protest will be released in May of 2026.